Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is the conversation, and inshallah today we are chatting to Maulana Ibrahim Bam, the Secretary General of Jamiatul Ulama South Africa. We've selected a very pertinent topic for today's discussion, and that is anger. And we know that every person has some form of anger in them, and every person controls their anger differently, and every person has different things that they resort to when they are angry. Sometimes the consequences of this are such that you cannot reverse them. Take in the context of marriage. Out of anger we hear so often, Maulana, I gave my wife talaq, but I was very angry, I was frustrated, I was furious. You cannot undo that. And that's a consequence of anger. So we're unpacking this topic today. We're going to look at it from a broad perspective and also maybe look at one or two specific examples. And the idea is to get ourselves acquainted as far as anger is concerned. Maulana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and assalamu alaikum to all the listeners.
Well, anger, as I mentioned in my introduction, every person has some form of anger, and every person's anger manifested differently. Just some opening remarks about anger before we get into the specifics.
Well, we all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept within us certain natural characteristics. We can't do without it. Allah has kept it within us, and one of them is anger. Now, it doesn't mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept it within us. We are supposed to vent it or manifest it the way we want to, because there are certain guidelines that the Quran and the Hadith and our Sharia tells us with regard to it. Yes, it is a natural characteristics, and yes, the ulama tell us, and what we learn from the Hadith is Islam doesn't desire that it must be eliminated, right? Abolished completely, because there is a need for it in the sense that if there is no anger, how will you proclaim the truth? If there is no anger, how do you protect your own interest? There's a certain degree of anger that is needed to be able to proclaim the truth, to be able to protect your interests. However, even in those instances where it is justified, or there is some form of justification, there is a great deal of warning from the ulama with regard to controlling it. And one of them is that it is shaitan's way that he uses to deceive and make you do things that are not correct. One of our ulama have given the example of a swelling ocean, like huge waves. And that is the example of anger, that if it's left, unhindered, it can cause tremendous amount of harm. And that is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوهُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. And part of the qualities of the pious people, even when they are angry, they can forgive. Ulama tell us that the meaning of this is a pious person, a person who adheres to the commands of Almighty Allah, never ever gets completely overwhelmed by anger that he does not know what he is doing. There's a statement attributed to Imam Hassan Basri rahmatullah alayhi, the believer never allows anger to overwhelm him. So yes, what we are talking about is, it's a natural characteristic. We don't desire that it must be completely eliminated, it must be controlled, it must be channeled. But even in that, there is a great degree of warnings that never allow it to get the better of you, because it can cause great amount of harm.
The question, Maulana, is that what's at the root of it? What's at the heart of anger? Is it expectations that people carry? You come home, you don't find certain things in certain way, so you lash out. Is it expectations that you carry? What's at the heart of anger?
Well, this is very interesting, and Jazakallah for asking that question. Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi, who is perhaps one of the greatest ulama who had actually studied the spiritual diseases. So Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi has written extensively on what are the causes of anger. So for example, he says that amongst the anger, part of it is self-conceit, having a very great opinion about your own self, self-praise, jest and ridicule, treachery, greed, pride, arrogance. He goes on to explain various things. And just for example, when you are asking about one of the causes of anger, would be pride and arrogance. And and to give the reason why it is pride and arrogance, you very seldom get angry to someone who is, from a worldly perspective, at a greater rank than you. So you won't, display your anger to a boss. Or you'll be more guarded when you do so, because you know that there's consequences. You could lose your job. It can have major repercussions upon your life. So you normally vent your anger to people whom you regard yourself as superior to. So you come in the house and you feel that you got a right over your wife, and you vent your anger, and sometimes you go overboard. So yes, one of them could be. And I think the spiritual diseases that ulama warns us with regard to anger is not only the manifestation of anger, but the causes. And the causes many a times are very, very severe, because it normally, is because of arrogance, pride, and those type of things.
I like how you explain it, that self-conceit could be at the heart of it, and you've got a certain expectation from a certain individual around you. If you look at the root of it, it's easier than to remedy the situation, because sometimes we are treating the symptom and not treating the root cause. What about people who are born with a lot of anger, Mara? Maybe they grew up, things happened in their life, and they were left bitter by those experiences. Now this individual gets married. They settle down with somebody else. But that anger is still there. And now somebody else around them is bearing the brunt of it. And the wife or the husband, anyone, it could be, that says, I never knew this man had this side to him, or this lady had this side to her. So what about that anger? It was there from a very long time.
While you can sympathize with that, it's not also a fair manifestation of that someone else must bear the brunt of your burden. I mean, if there has been issues in your life, you need to solve it out. You need to resolve it. You can't then now, because of your issues, make someone else bear the brunt of your issues. I mean, I think that's not fair at the end of the day. No matter how you look at it, from a logical perspective, I mean, you have issues, you had been bullied, or perhaps now that's perhaps one of the things that normally comes up, that you are dealing with issues of the past and you have not been able to resolve it, and therefore it comes back in terms of your future relationship. Well, whatever it is, even if it is like that, I'm not saying always like that, because sometimes you also get a feeling that, it's some people are searching for reasons to justify anger. But at the end of the day, even whatever it is, you have to resolve it. It's not fair for the other person to bear the brunt of your unresolved issues. So find ways of resolving your issues rather than making someone else the brunt of your issues.
And this is such an important point. And building on that, Maulana, we say that, no, he's just an angry person. He's always like that. The mother will also say, no, my Yusuf was always like that. He was angry. You must just get used to him. So, I want you to just speak about this more, that unresolved issues will continue to resurface all the time until it's not dealt with, even 20 years later.
Exactly my point. And I think Jazakallah for bringing it up, because again, why should someone else bear the brunt of your unresolved issues? And if you're always going to look for a justification,
so can you say, no, it's fine. No, he's always like, oh, I'm like this.
I don't buy into that. Like, for example, many times I've seen people who have abused their spouses. And when they are confronted, they say, this is not right. How can you do it? They say, they provoked me from doing it. Well, anyone can provoke you. Just because you are provoked doesn't mean you have to act in a particular way. You have to be able to, even if someone provoke you, you need to be able to control yourself. Doesn't mean someone provoke you, so you go and smash someone's car because you are angry and someone provoked you. There are going to be instances in life where you are going to be provoked, or you got a trigger, you feel that you are being provoked, or you are too sensitive, or you just got a self-conceitedness that you feel that someone has been provoking me and is against my shan, or it's against my pride and arrogance. So if you are not going to, and you're just going to use that as an excuse that I was provoked, then you are never going to deal with the issues. And I just don't buy that argument, which sometimes our elderly used to say, that the spouse provoked him, therefore he hit her. Right? I mean, what type of argument is there? I mean, at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own actions. You can't say someone made me do it. Now, if you look at our old history, it was Shaitan in Iblis that when they were expelled, what did they say? فَبِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. Oh Allah, you caused the situation to lead me astray. So he used another. He didn't accept his fault. So he was the one who blamed someone else with regard to the situation. And it was Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, when he was told that you have to leave Jannah because of what had transpired and what you had done. He said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Well, I've done wrong. If you don't forgive me, I'm going to be destroyed. So it's up to us to choose. Do you want to use the way of Shaitan and Iblis? Said, you did it. You provoked me. Or you use the way of our forefathers. Said, listen, this is something I need to deal with. I have done wrong. I need to deal with it. And I think to say that people provoke me to anger is actually echoing the arguments of Iblis.
Amazing. And you know, Maulana, they speak about that anger and sulkiness, that sometimes a person doesn't know how to receive love. So when you express love for them, they don't know how to respond. So it's either going to be in a form of sulkiness or in a form of anger. How do you deal with a situation like that?
Well, I just want to say one thing after that. I mean, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, "La khair liman la ya'laf wa la yu'laf," and I hope I'm getting the words right. But O kama qal, that there is no good in a person who can't receive love and give love. What good is there that you can't receive or give love? After all, we are receptacles of love. We are people whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, that we are supposed to show love. And one of the things that ulama tell us is تَخَلَّقُوا بِأَخْلَاقِ اللَّهِ, adopt and emulate the characteristics of Almighty Allah. And amongst the characteristics of Allah Ta'ala is wadud, the one who is excessive in showing and displaying love to people, and especially the people who are pious, and even sometimes the people who are not pious, because one of the characteristics of Kareem is the one who show kindness and compassion to the ones that are not even deserving of it. So we have to emulate that characteristic of Allah Ta'ala.
And sometimes when you get the bigger picture and you get more understanding in life, you also tone down a bit. Maybe Maulana, you can take your example maybe. Can we say when you just graduated and now looking 50 years down the line, has there been a change in temperament, and why has the change come?
Well, I suppose when there is greater maturity, you mellow. You come to look at things very differently compared to when you are young. And it is said that people who are young, it's a branch of madness. So yes, sometimes when you are young, you get this. It is a branch of madness sometimes. And many of the things that are happening, both positive and negative, happens by the youth. So they are the ones who create revolutions, sometimes positively or negatively. And that's important, that we learn to find the right balance and to be able to channel your energies in the right direction.
Now, earlier on you mentioned that natural anger is a part of our makeup. But if it's unbridled, then it will cause a lot of harm. How do we control our anger? What are some of the practical things that you can share with us?
You know, there are many beautiful tips that have been given in the Quran and Hadith, right? But when you look at it, what I liked about it was that someone written an article and he has condensed it into three things. One is the words of protection. One is the attitude and the mind to start thinking with regard to the knowledge. One is the words that you have to use. One is the bodily posture, and one is action. So if you break it down into these 3 or 4 things, is say words of protection. Like Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam saw a person very angry, and when he saw him in anger, he said, I know a sentence, if he says it, immediately it will calm him down. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, anger comes from Shaitan. Shaitan is the one who provokes you to anger, because he loves the consequences of anger. So he said, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Let him say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. It will calm him. And in another hadith, and that is part of action, when Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, anger comes from shaitan. Shaitan is made from fire, and water extinguishes fire. Let him go and make a wuzu. So it will be as if the wuzu water is falling upon his anger and cooling it down. So if you look at it that way, it is words of protection, and it is actions that protect you from that. The second thing that I like is change the bodily posture. Now, why that is also, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had said, if you are angry while standing, sit down. If you are angry while sitting down, then lay down. Now, we all know that hadith. We have heard it somewhere along the line from ulama. But look at the far-reaching consequences. When you are angry and you are standing, the possibility of doing harm while you are standing is greater than when you are sitting. So when you are standing, you can go and hit a person, you can go and assault a person, which you cannot do while you are sitting. And even when you are sitting, you can still do something that is harmful comparatively when you are lying down. So you can still take a item, I'm not recommending it, you can take an item and let go. You know what I mean? So then, but of course, compared to when you are standing, If you change your body posture to sitting down,
Right.
the possibility of harm has been now reduced and diminished. And if you from sitting down go and lie down, now when you are lying down, what are you going to really be able to do?
Exactly.
So change your bodily posture. And then the one that I really also like, which Imam Ghazali rahmatullahi alayhi has made mention, now start looking at it from a intellectual perspective. How do you control it? So one of the things is look at the rewards in the Quran and Hadith for controlling anger. Man kazama ghayzan wa huwa yaqdir. And he who controls his anger when he has got the ability to give vent to it. He's a husband. He can say something. He can show that particular things. He's an authority in the house. And the word qazam is very interesting. The ulama have said the word qazam is the string that ties the water bottle. So that time people used to have water bottles. They didn't have flask.
Right.
So they didn't have the different types of flasks that you have. So they had a water bottle. So when it used to be filled to the brim, they used to have a string that used to tighten it to control it so that the water doesn't spill over.
Right.
That ulama tells us is qazam. So, that's an example of qazam. So you control yourself even if there are the situation of giving vent to it. No, you control it. So you think about the rewards. Whoever controls his anger, Allah will call him in front of everyone and reward him with things that he didn't anticipate. Subhanallah. So one of the ways of controlling yourself is through the means of knowledge. Look at the reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises for a person who controls his anger. Then another way with regard to it is to think about the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you give vent to your anger in a wrongful way. Beautifully encapsulated in an incident that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam one day saw Abu Mas'ud Ansari hitting his slave. And Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Abu Mas'ud, and he turned around and he felt extremely embarrassed when he saw Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam seeing him doing this. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam told him, Abu Mas'ud, Allah has more control over you than what you have over the servant or the slave that you are beating up, which you are showing your anger and you are acting unjustly towards. Allah has more control over you. And Abu Mas'ud said, Ya Rasulullah, I free my slave. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, fortunate, I could see Allah's adhab coming down upon you. But you freed him and you saved yourself from Allah's adhab. So knowledge, attitude, that Allah has more control over the one that I'm giving vent and manifesting my anger. Then also to start thinking on a broader basis that how do I look when I'm angry? Try to look at yourself when you are angry. It's not a very good sight. You will see your eyes are like this and you're gesturing and you're doing things that isn't a very good sight. So knowledge. Why do I have to prevent myself from anger? Look at the way I look when I'm becoming angry. It's not like a person who is calm and composed. Now, this being calm and composed has always been looked upon as something as a good quality in a human being. I mean, don't you see, people will say, look at that person, how calm and composed he is. Now, compare that when you are angry. That calmness and composure goes out of the window. So these are some of the things. Like, for example, when you're angry, you can start thinking. Part of the knowledge, the intellectual basis to prevent yourself from anger is I'm becoming a toy in the hands of shaitan. Now shaitan is using me and he can now pull me in whichever direction I want. So there are ways that Imam Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi and ulama who are experts in this field have said. So if you look at the ways of controlling your anger, words of protection we made mention. We spoke about the aspect of actions. Go and make your wuzu. And then we talked about changing your posture because the posture makes a big difference in terms of what you can and what you cannot do. And the intellectual reasons. You can start thinking, why am I supposed to control my anger?
And just on the knowledge part, I read Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So he speaks about the phenomenon. He says, between a stimulus and a response is a window where you can choose to respond in a responsible way. So he gives the example. You come into the breakfast table and somebody in the family spills coffee on your garment.
Yes.
And maybe it's your unique one which you're wearing for an interview that day. So he says, now you've got two choices. Either you're going to get upset with the whole situation. It's going to impact on your mood. And as you go, whilst you are driving, it's going to impact on your driving. When you get to the office, it's going to impact on your performance at work also. said the second response is, you take it in your stride, you go back to the bathroom, you change nicely, you calm, you collected, you leave your home, you collected, you calm, you get to work, you are productive. He says, between a stimulus and a response is a window that you've got where you can choose to act responsibly. And I like what you say, what Imam Ghazali puts it, that the knowledge behind it. And the more knowledge you have about your emotions, man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu, the quotation that the more you know yourself, the better you'll have grips over the situation.
And that's one, it's also known as a 90-10 principle.
Yeah.
In the sense, it said 90% actually is not the actual incident, it's the way you respond to it. Right. And there are two ways of responding. One is that, it becomes a disaster, and one is that you responded in such a way you cool down the situation. That's what our beloved Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's way. And maybe I think, just to conclude, maybe a good way is to say that once a person came to Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and Allah refers to it in the Holy Quran. I won't go into all the details. They used to say certain things by twisting their tongue, which they made it sound as it was an innocent statement, but in reality there was a hidden meaning which was abusive. So instead of saying Assalamu alaikum, it says Assalamu alaikum. So Sam means destruction and Salam means peace. So when they made mention of this, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu ta'ala went on a tangent. You say like that, you are like this. Nabi Karim said, Aisha, what's going on? What are you saying? I mean, look at what he said there. So didn't you hear? I heard, but I also responded alaikum. The same be to you. So whatever he might have twisted his tongue, whatever he had said or whatever his intention was, I told him the same be with you. You don't have to, so I think that particular aspect has been very beautifully displayed by our beloved Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in various ways. That Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam always cooled down situations and brought situations down by removing the tension rather than giving in.
Now, earlier on, just to maybe end off on this point, earlier on you mentioned that you cannot totally annihilate anger. And we spoke about the harms of anger and how to control it. What about positive anger? What examples can you share with us in terms of what is good anger, healthy anger? What is the expression of it?
Well, the thing is, if you are going to, use your anger to, for example, and the one thing that ulama have also written, that sometimes it's very difficult to find the fine line between what is justified and what is not justified. Therefore, you rather err on the side of caution of controlling your anger. But of course, maybe one example you can give is Ali radiallahu anhu's example, that when he was fighting with, it's a very famous, incident that Ali radiallahu anhu was fighting with a person in jihad. He overwhelmed him, overcome him, was about to kill him when he spat on his face. And Ali radiallahu anhu got up and left him. He said, now, I was fighting with you. If I had half a chance, I would have killed you. Right? Because we were in a duel, we were in a battle, we were in an encounter. And yet you had the ability to completely annihilate me and destroy me, and then you walked away. And he said, first I was doing it for the sake of Allah. Now, I think that if I would have done anything, would have been my anger, the way you spat on me. So I just walked away from the situation. I think that is such an amazing incident that you have to ask yourself the question, why am I displaying it? And that is why the ulama say, and Imam Ghazali specifically made mention with regard to it, ask yourself, even if it's justified, that am I overstepping the bounds? And this gives us such a remarkable answer to that. That Ali radiallahu anhu felt that no, now he's overstepping the bounds. Now his anger is for another reason. And he just pulled away from that.
Subhanallah. Well, Jazakallah khairan for your time, much appreciated. We hope to have more conversations with you in the future.
Inshallah. Jazakumullah for the opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.